Thank you for joining us. We're really happy today to have Datuk Danial Mah here to discuss our market report, Labuan IBFC's industry report for 2019. Thank you for spending the time with us.
Thank you.
It's been a good year.
Yeah, it's been a good year.
It's been a good year. And really the idea behind this conversation is to get a deeper feel about Labuan IBFC, about your thoughts about our performance in 2019, how you want to see us moving forward from 2019, and whether we like it or not, we have to talk a little bit about COVID.
Yes.
And your aspirations for the jurisdiction moving forward.
Okay.
Right? So once again, thank you very much. And maybe we'll just dive into the first question.
Sure.
We understand that from the report that was launched a couple of weeks ago, that really the industries of insurance and banking have done really well in Labuan for 2019. Although a lot of people seem to think that actually 2019, or at least they thought 2019 was a bad year before 2020 came over. What are your thoughts about the performance of these areas? What are the key areas do you think there's possibility of growth in 2020? And your general feeling, your general sentiment about the jurisdiction, really.
Okay. So once again, thanks Farah for this interview. Yes, you are right. We just launched the market report for Labuan IBFC for the year 2019 a couple of weeks ago. This report is also already in our website. You can have a look at it. But let's focus on 2019. You are right. 2019 has been quite a good year. Still have been a positive year for Labuan IBFC, particularly for the banking side and for the insurance side. 2019 has not been any different from the past years. There's still growth. In fact, for the banks, I think the profits went up by about 27%. The insurance companies, their profits went up by about 43%. So you can see from the figures that 2019 has been quite a positive year for these two sectors in Labuan IBFC. But of course, we are not only in banking and insurance activities. There are a lot of other activities as well in Labuan IBFC. For example, the sectorial businesses, the trust companies, they also have been doing well. The other activities like the money broking, investment banking, so they has also been doing quite well. There are a couple of sectors that they may have been a bit more challenging, like for the leasing sectors. That's because of the situation that this industry has been experiencing in 2019. So overall, like I say, we have been doing well. Malaysian business has continued to go down, so to speak. Non-Malaysian business has been up. And that's natural because Labuan IBFC has always been focusing on the regional businesses, particularly for the Asian region. And that's also because of the locality of Labuan. It's smack right in the middle of the Asia Pacific region. So naturally, most of our business will come from that part of the world as well. So in terms of Malaysian and non-Malaysian business, you can say about 60% are non-Malaysians.
So, but do you not think, sorry to interject, but do you not think that actually the growth of Labuan from being a more Malaysian-based jurisdiction of financial intermediation and business intermediation to a more regional intermediating role, as it were, do you feel that actually this is a sign of maturity? And it segues into my next question, which is, this is our 30th year. Our 30th year as a jurisdiction. A lot of people don't realize it's been 30 years that we've been around. What are your thoughts about moving forward? Obviously this role of local versus foreign, but also the areas and the acceptability of Labuan, regionally. Your thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, we are right. We have been around for 30 years. In fact, this year is our 30th anniversary. We were planning to celebrate quite a bit.
We were, yes, indeed.
Unfortunately, because of the current situation, we couldn't do that. And you are right. Like you said, since 1990, we have been around. Been a sustainable growth pattern for Labuan IBFC since then. There were a lot of changes over the years, of course. We changed our laws and regulations. We changed our guidelines. We even changed our name. We used to be called IOFC, right? Now it's IBFC. But I guess the key thing is that we will continue to focus on wholesale business. We do have some retail business, but that's not our focus. Even for our banks, it's all about corporate banking,
Yes.
commercial loans and stuff like that. Even the insurance side is all about reinsurance. Something that we have been seeing in our reinsurance sector is the growth of this captive industry. So, and that has always been our focus over the years. And I think really, we will continue to focus on those areas of businesses because I think it's more suitable for us. Don't forget, Labuan is still part of Malaysia. So, of course, we have Kuala Lumpur financial sector, and then we also have the Labuan financial sector. We cannot be seen that we competing with each other. We need to complement each other.
Yes.
So, focusing on something which is wholesale, which is more institutional, is a better choice for us, a better strategy for Labuan. And I mentioned just now about being located strategically in this part of the world.
Yes.
And that has helped us a lot. And that you can see also from the pattern of the growth that we have in Labuan. Companies coming from this part of the world and doing all this intermediation, maybe from China to Indonesia or China to Singapore. And that's our role. And we have always been doing this intermediation. And we have done that quite effectively. And the reason why we have done it quite effectively is really because of maybe I just want to focus on two things. First is the laws and regulations that we have in place are suitable for this. We adopt a proportionate approach in terms of how we supervise our institution. Because we do not do a lot of retail businesses, so therefore we can have a more proportionate way of regulating these institutions. The other reason is also because of the presence of so many types of players that we have in Labuan. We have a whole spectrum of financial players to cater to all the needs of customers in this part of the world.
So actually, DJ, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Labuan's contribution to Malaysia. 30 years we've been around, we've become more international, more global, more regional. But over the last 30 years, we have been a key element in the growth of Malaysia and the growth of Malaysian corporates leaving Malaysia into the regional space. Could you talk us through a little bit about how that growth momentum has panned out and how you see us moving forward in our role as supporting Malaysia and Malaysian corporates?
So actually, at the very beginning, when the IBFC started, there were a lot of Malaysian business, of course, because it's natural, right? The government wants to be helping Labuan to kickstart, so to speak, and therefore you need something to kickstart it. And therefore, you see that the composition of Malaysian business in Labuan in the early years has been quite high. But like you mentioned just now, over the years it has panned out. So now we are seeing a lot more overseas business, non-Malaysian business rather than Malaysian business. So our focus is always two-pronged as far as Malaysian is concerned. First is to the island of Labuan. That's important to us because the island community is also our stakeholder. And of course, generally over the bigger agenda of how do you contribute to Malaysia. In the case of Labuan, of course, having a Labuan IBFC in Labuan by itself is already contributing, right? I mean, talk about infrastructural developments to cater or to support the so-called financial industry in Labuan. I mean, it has been tremendous over the years. There are a lot of investments that have been poured in. And Labuan IBFC by itself is also the largest employer in the island. We employ close to about 6,000 over people. In the grand scheme of things, 6,000 may not be a lot, but we are talking about Labuan of just a population of 90-something thousand people. Of course, all these players in Labuan, like for example, in the case of the trust companies, the activities that they do generates a lot of all these spin-offs. We do have trust companies that do a lot of so-called backroom processing, this middle office processing. So they employ 200-300 people. That's good to me. It's difficult to calculate to what extent, but the financial industry actually contributes close to about 57% of the GDP of Labuan. So over the years since 2014, if you see the figures, the contribution of financial sector to the Labuan GDP has actually gone up quite a lot in terms of the percentages. So that's Labuan, right? So if you talk about contributing to Malaysia, you mentioned just now Malaysians going out to do investment overseas, you can use Labuan. Because Labuan's role has always been intermediation, right? And how we have contributed to Malaysia has always been the element of providing capacity. You talk about credits. Banks do lend to Malaysians.
Yeah.
We are allowed to do that. You talk about financial capacity in terms of reinsurance capacity. So Malaysians, Labuan reinsurance companies have also provided that form of capacity to manage risk, so to speak, for Malaysians. These are all the so-called high specialized risks that cannot be done here anyway. So it's going to go out. So let Labuan be the absorbent, so to speak, to tap
the bumper.
The bumper to take. So that form of contribution, of course, the fiscal revenues in terms of Labuan contribution in the past years will not be that significant because of the way the tax framework is being done in Labuan. There's always this choice of a fixed amount of tax that you pay versus a certain percentage. And most companies will pick the fixed amount.
Of course.
And then certain activities also are not taxable. Just like here, foreign source income are not taxable. So fiscal revenues is not that significant, but I can tell you it's going to be significant.
It's changing, huh?
Yeah, it's going to change. It's going to change significantly, I can tell you, in the coming years. So the fiscal contribution will be there from now on. And of course, the other thing is because our players are comprising of all these so-called financial institutions which are from overseas. Global. They bring with them all this technical know-how, they bring with them knowledge, they bring with them experiences which will surely benefit our people. And I think that's how we contributed to Malaysia, and I think we will continue to do so.
Actually, you make a very good point, DG. I have always felt that actually Labuan is like the Intel inside of a, like a laptop. When you buy the laptop, you're really buying the processor. Labuan is almost like the processor inside of financial transactions, a lot of corporate transactions. And in, historically, maybe we've not been seen because we've not been able to put that sticker, as it were, on the laptop. But really, Labuan is that Intel inside, and a lot of people don't realize that, the planes that are being leased out of Labuan for Mars and Air Asia, it's all done through the jurisdiction.
That's right.
And the contribution to fiscal, the fiscal gains of Malaysia will increase, and this has got a lot to do with the change in the tax landscape. Walk us through this change in the tax landscape. Walk us through this global phenomenon that's been going on the last 2-3 years, this issue of economic substance, and how the tax regime has changed in Labuan, if you will.
So talking about all this so-called regime change, not really regime change, the tax framework.
The tax framework, yes.
Framework change. Now all this is arising because of the implementation of BAPS in the last few years.
Yes.
And Malaysia is a party to, is a member of this forum where we need to be compliant.
Yes, this is the forum by OECD.
The OECD.
And BAPS is the Base Erosion Profit Shifting Initiative, which is a global initiative to change the tax landscape globally.
Right. So all these things, every jurisdiction that are doing our kind of businesses will need to comply with these requirements. There are principles of it. I'm not going into all these principles.
No.
But as far as Labuan IBFC is concerned, the key changes that has been implemented particularly in the year 2019. All these things have been going on for a while, but the key change came in 2019. 1st January 2019, we introduced a new tax framework for Labuan.
Yes.
So now that framework, which has been around for the last 30 years, it has never changed. And come 2019, it was like a big
sea change.
Big watershed change, so to speak. And what are the changes? First one is that the rates have changed, right? Now, when I say rates, it means that the way things are being taxed or activities that will be taxed in Labuan will be changed. So in our case, what we have done is we have a whole list of types of activities that are being conducted in Labuan, right? So what we did is to differentiate between the activities. Depending on what you do, then these are the kind of substance requirement that you need to have. Otherwise, you won't be able to enjoy the incentives that have been put in place.
Correct.
That's how the principle is. So depending on, in the case of banks, you need to have a minimum of 3 people, then you need to spend at least 200,000 ringgit per
Yeah.
annum in Labuan.
Yeah.
So these are the so-called key changes, and like I say, any major change will bring about some form of uncertainty. There will always be these implementational
Yes.
so-called issues, and we have managed to so-called mitigate that in a way by way of having a cross-authority kind of a committee that was formed in Labuan IBFC. It's called the Labuan Investment Committee. So that's where we bring up all the issues, discuss all the issues, implementational and policy issues as well, relating to this tax change. And we give out some clarity about what it means and this. So to some extent, that has helped a lot. Hopefully we will continue to provide this form of clarification. And just to add more certainty to our players and how they can plan their tax structures moving forward. So that's the kind of change that has happened.
But the Labuan Investment Committee is made up of obviously Labuan FSA, the Revenue of Malaysia, and the Ministry of Finance.
Yes, you are right. That committee comprises of representatives from the Ministry of Finance, from the IRB, and of course us. Now, it's very important to emphasize here is that Labuan FSA is not the competent authority for tax matters actually. All those rules and regulations relating to the licensing, to market conduct, governance issues, transparency, anti-money laundering, what they call regulations. That's Labuan FSA. But when it comes to fiscal tax matters, actually it's not Labuan FSA. The competent authority is actually the MOF and the IRB. MOF, of course, is the policy maker. They set the policies and is implemented by the IRB. So having this so-called tripartite so-called committee is good, because at least we raise the issue with the competent authorities. I would like to stress here, maybe take the opportunity to also stress here, we have got a lot of support from these two major stakeholders, the MOF and the IRB. And we have gone through a lot of discussions on how when we wanted to implement this change. And I can tell you the support has been tremendous, and we are really thankful to the MOF and to the IRB for enabling us to come up with this framework that is at least acceptable to our players, so they can continue to do their business, and also acceptable to the OECD when it comes to complying at least at the global level. So in a way, when we implemented these changes, we are seen to be compliant. We have removed all those so-called impediments that
the ring fencing.
The ring fencing, the dealing residence, and then having all these substantial requirements. So it has put us in a good book, so to speak, with all these so-called global bodies. And I think maybe I want to stress a bit more here as well. Having these substantial activities also has been helpful for Labuan. With these substantial requirements, you need to have employees. You need to have presence. And having presence, therefore, you need to have an office. So the demand for talent, the demand for real estate will probably increase in Labuan. And I forecast that it will increase.
Yeah, you know, DG, the world is now AC and BC, before COVID and after COVID. So we need to talk a little bit about COVID.
Sure.
We need to talk a little bit about what Labuan FSA has done, if you don't mind, with regards to the relaxation of some requirements in order to ensure that businesses are able to operate. And really, what are your general thoughts about COVID? And I believe Labuan FSA, together with the industry, have come together to create a COVID fund for the island as well. Maybe you want to share with us a little bit about where the funds have gone, what kind of aid we're giving to the frontliners and to the needy there.
Right. Yes, you cannot avoid talking about that, right? We are right in the midst of that situation right now. So COVID-19 the effects of it have been unprecedented. That's the word that people have been using.
Absolutely.
And we are not sure also of the business landscape moving forward.
Correct.
Right? There's so much uncertainty. We're not sure how it's going to be played out, so to speak. Even at we are a regulator, right? So even, and we are bodies, we are a member of all these various multilateral kind of organizations. We comprise all these regulators. There's a lot of all this sharing of information, sharing of knowledge on how to handle this situation, what other jurisdictions are doing.
Yes.
So we have been scanning around, and we have been attending all these Zoom meetings, so to
Yes.
speak, with all these other regulators in terms of how they are managing the situation. Of course, in the first few months of this year, we are already seeing some form of impact, so to speak, to our industry, but not like on a large scale.
Yeah.
But of course, there will be pockets of sectors that will be impacted. The leasing structures. So that has gone down a bit in this year. I mean, it's natural. I mean,
it's the function of an economic situation.
And it's like a double whammy, because last year there was a significant drop in oil prices.
Yes.
So that has affected the oil and gas sector in Labuan, and then compounded with this situation now, the COVID-19. So that really doubles up everything. Absolutely. So you will see some impact, negative impact in that sector. There are also pockets of positive impact. I mean, you talk about all these new norms, you talk about digital related businesses. We have been focusing on that industry in the last couple of years, and we are seeing some increase again in that area. Of course, in the insurance side, there's one element of captive business. We are seeing a lot more players in that spectrum as well. But overall, we will continue to scan the region, of course, to see what else that we can do in terms of moving forward for Labuan IBFC. I mentioned about how the Labuan community is our stakeholder, right? Labuan FSA and the industry players, we came together to create like a central pool of some fund to help out the community during the peak period when MCO was being enforced. We gave a lot of things for the frontliners, distributing necessities to all these B40 communities. And also we have done quite a bit for the hospitals. Hospital in Labuan to enhance their facilities. Right? So we bought quite a bit of equipment for them, virus testing machine and things like that. We have not forgotten also the players. I mean, there are a lot of things that we need to do also for our players, especially the financial institutions.
Correct.
They are also facing challenges, right?
Yes.
And what we have done is to give some temporary regulatory relief for them. So this one relates to administrative governance. So there's some relief provided to them in terms of submitting documents to us, and also in terms of how they compute the solvency margin. Of course, the relief is not exhaustive, so we are also working out with the players in terms of what else that we can do for them to manage the situation. But of course, like I say, when we say we scan the environment, we are not just looking at businesses. We are, as a regulator, we also need to see what are the risks that we need to manage to make sure that we remain sustainable, as well as to make sure that our resilience is maintained.
So it's a situation where the systemic risk of the financial center itself needs to be managed. But at the same time, the regulator remains open and flexible with regards to the relief that the financial sector might require. So, but I think it's worth noting, Datuk DG, that because China is a key market for us, and when COVID started in China, I believe Labuan FSA already started allowing for regulatory relief for a lot of our Chinese players.
Yes, we need to remain agile. We have to know, we have to always monitor the situation, so to speak, and to make sure that we continue to provide the best services to our players, and they are able to operate without any so-called hindrance. So yeah, when you mentioned about China, the way we do things, we of course we don't discriminate between we don't discriminate anything. We will just make sure that whatever we do is for everybody.
Correct.
No matter where you are from. Yes. But of course, we learn from pockets of experiences what is happening in this part of the world, and we try to adapt to the thing, and then come up with a solution that will be best for all on how to move forward with their businesses. And we will do that. We will always continue to do that as a regulator.
So when we go out and market the jurisdiction, a lot of the comments we receive is the fact that Labuan IBFC is competitive because Labuan FSA is facilitative. And I think having a open, friendly, facilitative regulator has played well for the future, the history and the future of the jurisdiction, which is actually my next question.
Yes.
You have served in Labuan FSA, 18 years, 19 years. You've seen it grow. You've now ascended to be the Director General of the jurisdiction. What are your personal hopes and aspirations for Labuan IBFC moving forward, and how have you seen it grow?
You mentioned about 18 years. Actually, it's much longer than that. I've been in Labuan for what, about 22, 23 years.
Goodness.
Yeah,
okay.
That's been a while, right?
Been a while.
And things certainly have changed. The change has been significant in the sense that, I mean, it's from like a plain vanilla kind of a jurisdiction to now a bit more international in a sense.
Yes.
And the key thing I always say this is that you have a good set of players. You must have the good set of players to be able to run the businesses. We can provide the rules and regulations, right? But at the end of the day, to do the business is the players.
Correct.
And having that wide spectrum of players, close to about 500-600 of them.
Yes.
The whole spectrum of them, providing the kind of services that they are good at to customers. To me, that I can say is the success story of Labuan IBFC. And of course, they provide employment to Labuan people. So things have changed, right, over the years. I just want to go back to what you can do in Labuan. There are a lot of things you can do in Labuan actually. It's an island surrounded by beautiful seas, there are good beaches there. And the good part of Labuan is that everything is within reach. And of course, the links to history has been fascinating for Labuan. You can learn a lot. If you go to the museum there, you will know that how Labuan was set up during the Brunei Sultanate times.
Yes.
I'm very sure that this admiral from during the Ming Empire, Cheng Ho.
Cheng Ho.
Yeah, I'm sure he stopped in Labuan before he goes on to Malacca. So Labuan was his first stop.
Because it was part of the Brunei Sultanate.
That's right.
And Labuan has its name from Pelabuhan.
That's right.
Which is the Malay name for port, because it is the deepest natural port. In Borneo. Yeah. And what about your personal aspirations for the jurisdiction?
For Labuan IBFC itself, of course, like I say, we have been around for 30 years. We have always gotten a good reputation. We are well regarded. We are seen to be well regulated. We have been compliant with a lot of international standards.
Yeah.
We have good set of players. We have a wide spectrum of players as well. But at the end of the day, what we really want to see, I mean, moving on, my aspiration is there are a lot more vibrancy in the sense of having a lot more business activities in Labuan, because that by itself will generate more spin-offs, so to speak.
Yes.
There will be a lot more employment opportunities for our people, for Malaysians as well as for non-Malaysians to come to Labuan. And I've always said this, the aspiration of having a good training academy in Labuan would be quite good, right? Because at the end of the day, you talk about knowledge transfer, that's very important. That will be my aspiration. But at the end of the day, I think if you talk about the next 30 years, in terms of our reputation being enhanced, in terms of, as a well-regarded and well-regulated jurisdiction, that will be key, so to speak. And hopefully we will see that in the next 30 years.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for your insights.
Sure.
It's been a fantastic opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.